health guidelines, but we have our fingers firmly crossed. What we have done is to bring forward the annual Energy Efficiency and Renewables Conference from June until next week. So we'll be holding that as a virtual event next week. We have a fantastic program lined up for the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Conference. So if you check out our website at www.energy.tt, you'll get a lot of more details about that conference next week. But the annual major flagship Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference is the biggest, and even if I say so myself, the best business-related conference in the region. Over the years, the conference has grown to become the go-to place to discuss the issues facing the energy industry, to identify the trends, and to make the connections and gather the data that is so important to everyone's businesses. I sometimes hear comments or read comments on social media that dismiss conferences like these as mere talk shops. This totally misses the point. It's through dialogue, conversation, and exchange of opinions that new opportunities are identified, new positions taken, and new ideas are forged. Indeed, it is primarily through conversation and the exchange of ideas that we encourage people to adopt new mindsets and to shift their perceptions. Fortunately, in a democracy, you can't mandate people to change their minds. There are many important initiatives and projects that have come out of the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference and its predecessor, Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Conference, as it was originally called. The whole lease out, farm out program for idle wells and idle acreage came out from the conference in the late 1980s. The conference really helped to push the issue of gas curtailments and the future of the gas value chain right to the top of the agenda, particularly in 2017. The excellent working relationship between the oil industry in Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname has largely been forged at successive Trinidad and Tobago energy conferences. The current UWI, UTT carbon capture and sequestration project arose through this conference. So those are just some examples of the sort of initiatives which get taken coming through the conference. But also at every conference, participants meet, exchange ideas, identify new business opportunities, either on the trade show floor or the numerous networking opportunities that exist. So the fact that the conference is much more than a mere talk shop is why our members and delegates return year after year, and why we have so many loyal and committed sponsors. Even though we are still a little uncertain about exactly how the event will be rolled out in June, we already have 6 of the most important companies in the Caribbean already lined up as platinum sponsors, namely BPTT, BHP, First Citizens, the National Gas Company, Proman, and Shell. 5 of these 6 were platinum sponsors in 2020, while Proman was a gold. We also have other gold and silver sponsors coming on board. Touchstone have already signed up as a silver sponsor. I think this clearly shows the strength of the Energy Conference, and we expect to be welcoming many more sponsors over the next few weeks. We already have indications that Heritage will sign up as a gold sponsor, for example. Over the coming weeks, we'll also be rolling out more information on the trade show portion of the Energy Conference. This is an area where we'll need to be extremely careful about COVID guidelines, and we're going to have to prepare a number of different scenarios depending on the pandemic status come June 2021. For this morning's launch, we thought it was important not just to announce the details of the June conference and some of the practicalities, but also to make sure that we discuss substantive issues facing the sector early in the calendar year. On that note, I am delighted that we have with us here this morning the Honourable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Senator Franklin Khan, who will be delivering the feature address this morning. Our conference theme for 2021 is Navigating the Caribbean's Energy Transition, and we've asked Honourable Minister to reflect on the energy sector portions of the Roadmap to Recovery report that was commissioned last year by the Honourable Prime Minister. We think that the roadmap is an important place to start if we're going to successfully navigate the current storms that we are all facing. Following the Minister's address, we will have a roundtable discussion with 4 representatives of our platinum sponsors: Claire Fitzpatrick, the Regional President of BPTT, Mark Luquan, the President of the National Gas Company, group of companies, Jerome Dukey, the Managing Director of Methanol Holdings Limited and Caribbean Nitrogen Company Limited and N2000, all of the Proman Group, and Vincent Pereira, President of BHP Trinidad and Tobago, who will be joining us via Zoom. They will be joined by Dwight Mahabir, the Chairman of the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago and the Managing Director of Damus Limited. Before the Minister gives us his feature address, Dwight Mahabir will bring some remarks from the Energy Chamber's perspective. So with no further ado, I welcome you all to this launch, and I will invite Dwight to the podium for his presentation. Dwight. We'll just be sanitizing the podium as Dwight is coming up.
Thank you, Dax. Senator the Honorable Franklin Cann, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, representatives of our platinum sponsors, members of the Energy Chamber, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual launch of the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference 2021. Somewhat different, materially different from what we're used to, but welcome anyway. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Chamber, I am very happy that you are able to join us. The year since our last energy conference in February 2020 has been a strange and difficult one. Just about this time last year, at our flagship Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference, there was a palpable sense of optimism in the sector. After years of decline, Trinidad and Tobago's gas production had seen 2 years of growth, and there were many new investments on the horizon. Guyana had just joined the ranks of oil producers, and there was positive news of exploration success coming out of neighboring Suriname. While prices were not stellar, they were certainly healthy. While it was still early days, the new state-owned Heritage Petroleum had got off to a successful start, and the restructuring of the old Petrotrin had happened without major incident. There were obvious concerns here in Trinidad about concluding gas sales contracts with the downstream plants, and we had just seen the closure of the Yara plant, the oldest petrochemical plant in the region. But there was a sense that with a more stable upstream environment, progress was being made. At the time of the conference last year, the coronavirus seemed a distant echo away on the other side of the world, and not something that we should really have been very bothered about. Of course, all that quickly changed, and the pandemic has had and continues to have a profound impact on our industry, our region, and the entire world. We saw unprecedented declines in demand for transport fuels, and in the first half of last year, rapid declines in commodity prices, with WTI crude famously going into negative territory. The global oil and gas industry has been badly battered, with a slew of service companies entering insolvency protection programs, share prices in many of the major companies collapsing, and capital investment programs being slashed around the world. These global trends have also impacted us here in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have seen petrochemical producers deciding to idle some of their plants in Trinidad in response to low commodity prices brought about by the pandemic. We have seen gas production and exports of our major commodities fall steeply over the course of 2020. Coping with the COVID-19 safety protocols, especially the restrictions around international travel, has led to some delays in project execution, increased operating and capital costs, and has impacted some of our service companies as they have missed out on important opportunities in the wider region. Nevertheless, as a region, the Southern Caribbean has perhaps fared better than most. While some projects have been delayed, we have not seen upstream development projects being canceled or formally postponed. In Guyana and Suriname, the extremely successful exploration and development programs have continued almost without missing a beat, even with changes in government in both countries, and in Guyana, many months of political uncertainty post-election. Thankfully, this has all been peacefully resolved. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have had a disappointment with one highly anticipated deepwater exploration well. But on the flip side, exploration success in an unexpected area, with Touchstone's onshore gas finds taking many by surprise. As the recently released Ryder Scott audit of gas reserves for 2019 has indicated, our overall national gas reserve situation remains relatively healthy, with significant potential exploration leads remaining to be investigated. And while we have seen some plants idle operations, we have seen one new plant, Caribbean Gas Chemicals, commence production. Even with these bright spots, 2020 has been overall a difficult and challenging year. It certainly feels like we are still not out of the hurricane, so to speak. And while the vaccine holds promises of a brighter future and smoother sailing ahead, I think we all know that we are not out of the rough seas as yet. And as most would agree, as a country, we did not enter this storm with a vessel in the best possible condition. In addition to the short-term pandemic-created storms, there are longer-term issues for the country that need to be addressed even as we are navigating today's rough seas. The global energy sector is going through a significant transition, brought about primarily by the need to address climate change and the need to decarbonize our economies. The implications of this for hydrocarbon-dominated economies, such as ours, are significant. Reducing the carbon intensity of our energy industry is crucial for its long-term survival. Improved energy efficiency, the introduction of renewable energy, and other carbon reduction technologies, such as carbon capture and sequestration, need to be at the center of our energy policy. Next week, as Dax has said, the Energy Chamber will be hosting our annual Energy Efficiency and Renewables Conference as a virtual event, where many of the issues and opportunities in that area will be fully ventilated. Efficiency is also a very important concept for the sustainability of our traditional gas and petrochemical sectors. As mentioned previously, Trinidad and Tobago has been challenged to maintain investment and production across the entire value chain. And over the past year, we have seen plants in Point Lisas being either temporarily or permanently taken offline. The Energy Chamber has had a long association with Point Lisas. Indeed, it was our predecessor, South Trinidad Chamber, that originally promoted the idea of the industrial estate and incorporated the Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Company, or PLIPDECO, back in 1966. Point Lisas has been a cornerstone of the country's economy for many years and provides tens of thousands of well-paying jobs and economic opportunities for hundreds of service companies, not to mention all of the spin-off economic activity, government taxes, and foreign exchange earnings. The estate is an extremely important market for our upstream gas producers and is integral to the economic success of Trinidad and Tobago. Plants on the estate have faced a challenging time in recent years, firstly with shortages in gas supply, and then with competition from other international producers, especially in the USA, who are able to access cheaper natural gas in a time of low commodity prices. The Energy Chamber believes that the petrochemical sector has the potential for a continued positive future in the country, but we all need to pull together to make sure that the gas industry as a whole can survive. The current work to develop a new medium-term strategy for the gas industry being undertaken by the Ministry of Energy with consulting support by Gas Strategies of the UK is extremely important for the future of the entire country. The scope of this strategic review needs to both ensure that the industry can survive in the short term and that all of the necessary changes are addressed to create long-term sustainability. The Energy Chamber is closely monitoring this work and stands ready to play a deeper role in the project as the trade association representing all players in the sector. Minister Khan will be turning to you for assistance in this regard. There is one somewhat uncomfortable issue that is vital for the future of the gas industry that the Energy Chamber strongly believes must be tackled head-on. That is the subsidy that the gas industry provides to the electricity sector and hence to every household, company, and government body in the country. The electricity sector consumes a significant volume of natural gas, around 250 million standard cubic feet per day. And this gas is provided to the country at rates that are significantly below the prevalent prices in the petrochemical and LNG sectors. This imposes a significant burden on the gas industry, which under current market conditions is proving to be too heavy a load to carry and is contributing to the sustainability challenges faced by the industry. We appreciate that dealing with the electricity subsidy is not an easy political decision and offer two important points for consideration. Firstly, it is very important to recognize that the challenge is not the subsidy to low-income households. These households contribute only a very small portion to total electricity demand and therefore demand for the natural gas from which electricity is produced. The subsidy to these households is not a heavy burden to carry. And there are very good social and economic reasons to ensure that every household is able to access basic electricity services. The Energy Chamber's view is that the subsidy should continue for low-income households. The second point to consider is that higher electricity rates do not automatically translate into higher bills if people become more efficient at managing electricity use. There have been studies in Trinidad that show that electricity consumption can be cut by 40% in most government and commercial buildings through the simplest of electricity management programs. There is no doubt that significant savings can be realized in the private sector and domestic market as well. In other words, as electricity prices increase with the reduction or removal of subsidies, the public and private sectors and individuals may not be faced with higher bills if they alter their consumption pattern. An added national benefit is that there are many opportunities that exist for small and medium-sized businesses if consumers decide to actively reduce their electricity consumption. This includes things like retrofitting buildings to make them more energy efficient, installing solar water heaters, more efficient air conditioning systems, and the like. In our view, asking public and private sector entities as well as individuals to accept that across the board electricity subsidies are not sustainable is not too much to ask. We all need to accept that we must be more efficient in our use of electricity. This is especially the case when one considers the significant benefits that will arise from making additional gas available to the gas industry, and on the flip side, the significant impact to the country and its citizens if the industry is not sustained well into the future. In addition to the electricity sector, Trinidad and Tobago has also made commitments to reduce carbon emissions in our transport sector. Globally, this is the sector where the majority of petroleum products from oil are consumed, including diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. This sector has seen massive decreases in demand over the past year due to COVID-related travel restrictions. There are some respected analysts who believe that demand for petroleum products will never again reach pre-pandemic levels. While this may or may not be an exaggeration, clearly the commitments to zero or net zero carbon emissions being made across the world, and with the USA joining or rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, the long-term demand for crude oil is likely to decline over the next few decades. This means that as a country that still has significant oil reserves in the ground, we should be moving quickly to encourage investment in the oil sector and to produce as much as we can while a market still exists for crude. I've heard Minister Khan say repeatedly that oil is still good business. I agree with him. The Energy Chamber has long argued for changes to the Trinidad and Tobago petroleum taxation regime to encourage and attract investment, and we were delighted that the government restructured the supplemental petroleum tax for small onshore producers in the last budget. There are still some tweaks that we would like to see that would make the change even more beneficial, but it was certainly a move in the right direction and one that we fully support. The Energy Chamber also warmly welcomed the announcement by the Minister of Finance in his October 2020 budget speech that the government is, and I quote, keenly focused on improving the investment climate in the energy sector through a review of the Petroleum Taxes Act with a view to simplifying the existing oil and gas fiscal regime and making it more competitive to investors. In response to this announcement, the Energy Chamber has pulled together a high-powered industry task force with a view to supporting the government in these efforts. Minister Khan, we look forward to meaningful engagement with the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance in the coming months to explore possible reforms to the system. The restructuring of the state-owned Petrotrin and the creation of the new upstream-focused Heritage Petroleum has already shown signs of success in terms of improved efficiency and cost-effective production. With the right fiscal system in place, we think that there's a window of opportunity that exists for a revived oil industry, even while the energy transition unfolds. One of the reasons that we have advocated so hard for the change in SPT for small oil producers, because these oil companies, small oil companies, use a lot of local services whenever they have drilling programs or infrastructural development projects. Many of their investment dollars recirculate in the local economy, and their investment activity helps generate significant economic opportunities for local service companies and contractors, which in turn means more well-paying jobs, especially in the economically depressed rural communities of South Trinidad. In general, increasing the value of the spend by all operators that is retained in the local economy or local content is an important objective for the Energy Chamber. For the country as a whole, increasing local content is important from a forex perspective, as it means less US dollars are spent on accessing goods and services from outside the country. Local content needs to be paired with local capacity development and ensuring that we have a sustainable and robust local energy services sector. It has long been recognized that Trinidad and Tobago's energy service companies represent one of the best chances to drive forward the much desired diversification of our exports. These companies have the potential to export to the wider Caribbean and hence earn forex by selling services to both the traditional oil and gas industries in countries like Guyana and Suriname, but also a wider range of energy services in niche areas in the rest of the region. We must also recognize that there is growing expertise in the wider region, and in many cases, there are things that we can learn from the rest of the Caribbean, especially in the renewable space. There are clear and immediate benefits to be had through the full implementation of the CARICOM single market and economy. The integration of service sector markets through removing barriers and improving trade facilitation to make the movement of goods, equipment, and people seamless has potential benefits to the entire CARICOM region. We have noted the renewed focus on the CSME in the aftermath of the pandemic, and we believe that this must be a key objective for the Caribbean region to be pursued aggressively. Minister Khan, please be assured of our full support in the government's efforts to integrate the regional energy sector. We know that progress to implement the Memorandum of Understanding with Guyana has been delayed due to the pandemic and the change in government in Guyana, but we stand ready to assist to the best of our ability to operationalize the MOU. We have forged, as a chamber, strong stakeholder relationships in Guyana and Suriname, and we have been instrumental in the creation of the new Caribbean Chambers Network, of which our CEO is the current chair. And we would like to leverage these linkages for the overall benefit of the country and the region. Improving the functioning of the CSME is just one element of the overall improvements to the ease of doing business that are necessary to unlock the full potential of our economies. There are many other issues that we must urgently tackle as well. Many of these issues, including those that I have outlined here today, are well known to many of you. Many of them were detailed in the Roadmap to Recovery report commissioned by the Prime Minister last year. That document is an excellent starting point for us to work together with the government as we continue to navigate today's challenges on our journey to a brighter future. As always, the challenge is to make sure that we implement the ideas that have been outlined in the document. Minister Khan, you have the assurance that the Energy Chamber will continue to work closely with you and your government as we navigate the road to a brighter future. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome. Please enjoy the rest of the conference and the session to follow. And thank you very much. Have a good morning.
Thank you very much, Dwight Mahabir, Chair of the Energy Chamber. My job now is just to invite to the podium for the feature presentation this morning, the Honourable Minister of Energy and Energy Industry, Senator the Honourable Franklin Khan. Minister, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dax. Dr. Dax Driver, President and CEO of the Energy Chamber. Mr. Dwight Mahabir, Chairman of the Energy Chamber, and he gave such a wide-ranging speech a while ago. Executives of the energy companies, other specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my honor to address you today in such a critical time for the energy sector and to welcome you to the virtual launch of the Energy Conference 2021. Over the years, we have witnessed the Energy Conference grow to become a much anticipated annual fixture on our calendars, and with good reason. The Energy Conference has become something of a one-stop shop, a central point of focus which brings together key players from the energy sector and presents opportunities to forge business relationships, all within a proven hydrocarbon provinces with advantageous regional linkages. When I speak to Trinidad and Tobago being a proven hydrocarbon province. I draw reference to the results of the latest reserves audit conducted by Ryder Scott for the year ended 2019, which I presented to the media last week. The reserves audit revealed that the country's total unrisked technically recoverable reserves, which was formerly called 3P, have been increasing since 2016. Between 2018 and 2019, we were able to replace our P1 and C1 technically recoverable reserves at a rate of 113%, taking our P1 and C1 resources, which was formerly known as proven reserves, from 10.5 TCF to 10.7 TCF. Exploration resources continue to exceed 50 TCF, due mainly to successes in deepwater exploration, which also resulted in the movement of large volumes out of this category into the technically recoverable resources. As is well known, the energy sector remains the largest contributor to the social and economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government has been actively working with industry stakeholders to maximize the contribution from the development of these resources. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a slowdown of activities in the energy sector and other sectors of the economy. To address the impact on the country, in April 2020, the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, established a roadmap to recovery committee. The committee was given a mandate to chart a roadmap to recovery, focusing on 3 immediate priorities, namely, 1, addressing and mitigating the hardship inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. 2, restarting the economy. And 3, laying the foundation for sustained economic recovery. The committee Phase 1 Roadmap to Recovery report was laid in Parliament in July of 2020 and included several energy sector initiatives which were required to encourage activity in the sector. Paramount among the initiatives identified by the Roadmap to Recovery Committee was the maintenance of the exploration and development schedule of major upstream projects. Trinidad and Tobago has a well-established upstream sector, with participants including major international oil companies, IOCs, such as BP, Shell, BHP, and EOG. Working alongside the IOCs, there is a well-developed and experienced service sector residing here in Trinidad and Tobago. We consider the upstream companies as partners in the development of the country's hydrocarbon resources. We have been working with the upstream companies to understand the challenges that they are facing and the part that government can play to minimize the delays in startup of projects. The implementation of several projects was unavoidably delayed by the disruption of global supply chains and the implementation of strict COVID-19 protocols. However, the upstream companies have used the lost time to recalibrate and rework their schedules. As a result, the delayed projects are due to come on stream in the latter part of 2021 and onwards. The key projects include 1, production from Touchstone Ottawa Block, namely Coho and Cascadura wells in Q3 2021. 2, BHP's Ruby and Delaware projects in Q4 2021. Shell's Barracuda and Colibri in Q4 2021 and into 2022, adding a combined total of approximately 450 million standard cubic feet per day at peak production. EOG's Osprey East in 2022, and BP's Cassia C and Matapal projects in 2022, adding incremental production increases of up to 300 million scoffs per day and peak production of 300 million scoffs per day, respectively. Further afield, we are working with Shell to mobilize production from the Manatee field, which was successfully delinked from Loran on the Venezuelan side as early as 2025. Production from this field could range from 300 million standard cubic feet per day to as high, and hopefully we are right here, to as high as 750 million standard cubic feet per day. Consequence on the relatively positive outlook for gas production in the next 3 to 5 years. Government has taken the strategic decision to perform critical maintenance on Train 1 to ensure that the train is operable and ready to go, so to speak, when more gas becomes available. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to spend some time addressing the issue of the downstream industry. The downstream industry has not been forgotten or neglected, contrary to the misinformation being circulated in the media. The downstream industry has and continues to be, as Dwight mentioned, a major achievement of Trinidad and Tobago, also internationally known as the Trinidad and Tobago's model of development. As a significant owner of foreign exchange, the downstream has a critical part to play in the country's economic recovery. However, the downstream industry operates in a highly elastic global environment where prices are dictated primarily by demand. Prior to 2014, commodity prices for ammonia and methanol were at an all-time high. In 2012, for example, ammonia prices reached as high as US $670 per metric ton for the Caribbean ammonia spot price and US $700 per metric ton for the US Tampa spot price. Since then, prices have fallen to just over $200 per metric ton. Similarly, for methanol, in 2014, FOB US Gulf Coast prices were in excess of US $400 per metric ton before falling steadily from there. There was some recovery in methanol prices in 2018 on the back of increased demand from China for methanol to olefin projects. In 2020, the US Gulf methanol FOB price fell below US $200 per metric ton. It has since recovered somewhat as a result of reduced global supply. In December 2020, which was just last month, the US FOB US Gulf Coast methanol price stood at US $385 per metric ton. Ladies and gentlemen, and I've made this point and I want to make it again here today. The government has no control over the global demand for commodities such as methanol and ammonia. We are at the mercy of the market. Global ammonia trade, for example, fell by an estimated 800,000 to 900,000 metric tons in 2020, according to Argus Analytics, which also noted that global ammonia demand, particularly for industrial use, fell in line with COVID-19 lockdowns and containment measures. The issue with the petrochemical sector, I must admit, is not solely due to COVID-19, but have certainly been exacerbated by the reduction in demand resulting from global lockdowns. In a low-price environment, it is only reasonable to expect that companies would do what is in their best interests and reorganize their portfolios to cut costs, operate more efficiently, and support global prices for the commodities that they produce. This reorganization of portfolios has come at a cost to Trinidad and Tobago. In Nutrien's Q3 2020 earnings release, the company noted that the September closure of the O3 plant is expected to enhance the competitiveness of the Trinidad site, and that the other 3 plants on the site are running at normal production levels. Similarly, in Yara's third quarter 2020 presentation, it was noted that the company's overall improved energy efficiency was driven in part by the closure of the Yara plant. In this new environment, some of these old, inefficient plants cannot survive. This is the reality of operating mature plants in a low-price environment. However, this issue is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago. Russia also is reported to have reduced its ammonia export by 300,000 metric tons, while Egypt EBIC ammonia plant reduced its capacity from July to October 2020 until the market improves. It is a fact that the cost of feedstock is higher than US competitors with abundant shale gas. However, according to an assessment by Argus Media, Trinidad production costs remains relatively low. For ammonia, Trinidad production cost is the second lowest, second only to the United States, which has now become our major competitor. With respect to commodity prices and global economic growth, Argus Media medium-term outlook for ammonia industry is stable, with prices forecast to remain firm, projecting that ammonia prices will range between US $225 per metric ton to US $275 per metric ton in 2021. For methanol, S&P Global Platts expect that prices in the first half of 2021 will trade above $400 per metric ton due to tightness in supply. We are already there. However, in the second half of the year, production capacity is expected to increase, bringing prices down to just below $350 US per metric ton by the end of the year. While there is little that can be done about the global economy, as a government, we have taken steps to ensure that there is an adequate and reliable supply of gas available to the downstream. This is important in this low-price environment, as it will allow citizens to optimize, it will allow companies to optimize their production. Ladies and gentlemen, this government is doing everything within our means to strengthen the natural gas value chain. In the natural gas business, more so than almost any other industry, the upstream, midstream, and downstream are inextricably linked. And each of these sectors is a complex moving part in its own right. On the one hand, we have the upstream players who have been requesting higher prices to adequately compensate for a return on capital investment and refurbishment of aging infrastructure. And there is veracity in that claim. On the other hand, we have a mature downstream petrochemical industry which has to operate in a competitive global environment. In between both of these, we have Atlantic LNG, which is in the midst of a restructuring exercise, and the midstream aggregator and transporter, the National Gas Company, the NGC, which has been virtually squeezed by the diminishing margins. In order to better understand the relationship between the sectors, we enlisted the services of UK consultants Gas Strategies team to critically examine and recalibrate our natural gas value chain. The Gas Strategies team have been engaged in consultation with stakeholders across the value chain, the results of which will be used to fulfill their mandate of developing a 2030 natural gas master plan, which embodies a medium to long-term strategy for the sustainability of the natural gas industry of Trinidad and Tobago. Energy sector development, ladies and gentlemen, is not complete in the 21st century unless it includes renewable energy and energy efficiency. Next week's conference will be on this topic, and you have already been briefed on that. The government is making strides towards adding renewable energy to our local energy mix in the interest of meeting our energy needs in a clean and sustainable manner, while also fulfilling our commitments made under the Paris Accord. We have taken steps to meet our commitment and expect the tangible results will soon be apparent. As we move forward with future projects in this area, and this is a key point, we must be mindful that each country's transition strategy would be unique to that country, created based on its needs, resources, and starting position. Some countries are still in the process of moving away from coal, and others are beginning to recognize the importance of natural gas alongside renewables in a transition strategy, while Trinidad and Tobago was one of the first countries to utilize natural gas for power generation and has been doing so for decades. This is not to say that we should rest on our laurels and allow the rest of the world to overtake us, like the proverbial tortoise. To explore strategies for the decarbonization of our natural gas, we intend to restart the discussion surrounding carbon capture, utilization, and storage. But I just want to reiterate the point that this government continues to see natural gas as a transition fuel over, I would hope, an extended period of time. You know, there's a saying in Trinidad, drunk or sober, mind your business. And we have to do that because the income of this country largely depends on the world's acceptance that natural gas will be a transition fuel into the next couple of decades or so. Ladies and gentlemen, the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference has now grown to become the premier energy conference within the Caribbean region and beyond, which is re-emerging as a hub for hydrocarbon exploration and production, as if you already heard from your chairman. In Suriname, 4 oil discoveries were made in 2020, totaling 1.4 billion barrels of oil equivalent, with another major oil and gas discovery announced only last week. In Guyana, Exxon has made 18 successive discoveries since its first find in the Starbuck field in 2015. That's a world record, totaling some 8 billion barrels of oil equivalent. With these recent hydrocarbon discoveries, the annual energy conference will become increasingly important in connecting players in the upstream, midstream, and downstream with each other and with established and experienced energy service companies. To this end, I am guided to have my first official meeting tomorrow with the Honorable Vikram Bharat, Minister of Natural Resources of Guyana, who has a responsibility for the petroleum sector in Guyana. Among other things, we will discuss the role that Trinidad and Tobago can play in collaboration with the Guyanese government as defined in the Memorandum of Understanding on Energy Sector Cooperation that was signed in September 2018 by our Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, and then President of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. We also intend to put the mechanisms in place to foster the growth of the Trinidad and Tobago energy service sector for our mutual benefits. Keyword there is mutual. And for the continued evolution of our local energy service companies. Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you today that the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries and the government by extension is working assiduously to capitalize on this period of downtime, so to speak. We are determined to use this period to recharge and recalibrate so that we are well positioned and well equipped for the recovery phase, and beyond that, for the long-term sustainability of the sector. I would like to once again recognize the Energy Chamber for its perseverance and dedication in hosting events like the Energy Conference and the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Conference. In challenging times, a forum such as this esteemed Energy Conference is all the more necessary in fostering healthy discourse within the industry and building symbiotic relationships. Crises present unique challenges to our sector, but with these challenges come opportunities for growth and renewed collaboration to share our learnings. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you once again for your attention, and I hope that we may be able to reconvene in person once it is safe to do so for the productive, engaging, and enlightening energy conference that we have grown so accustomed to. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for your feature presentation. We now move straight into a panel discussion. If you people just bear with us for a couple of minutes while we take up our seats for the panel. So we'll be back with you in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Expand your business online with EasyBiz, your affordable, easy, and innovative one-stop e-commerce solution. Accept electronic payments on social media. Create an online store. Automate invoices and accounting. Move into e-commerce with First Citizens EasyBiz. Expand your business online with EasyBiz, your affordable, easy, and innovative one-stop e-commerce solution. Accept electronic payments on social media. Create an online store. Automate invoices and accounting. Move into e-commerce with First Citizens EasyBiz.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome back now to our panel discussion. I'm Dax Driver, the CEO of the Energy Chamber, and it gives me a great pleasure to welcome our very esteemed panel, who I'll start with Mr. Dwight Mahabir, the Chairman of the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago, and then Mr. Mark Luquan, of the National Gas Group of Companies, Claire Fitzpatrick of BPTT, and Jerome Dukey, of MHTL, Caribbean Nitrogen Company, N2000, and all part of the Proman Group. And joining us on Zoom, I hope he is here, is Mr. Vincent Pereira, the President of BHP Trinidad and Tobago. I hope you're hearing us well, Vince.
Yep,
So the primary aim of this panel discussion, where we have 4 of the 6 representatives of our platinum sponsors. To just mention, we have 2 other platinum sponsors as well, Shell and First Citizens, who will be joining us at the conference in June. But the primary objective of this roundtable discussion is really just to highlight some of the things the Energy Chamber has been talking about, our main sort of advocacy points, but also I think to explore what are the big issues facing the industry, both here in Trinidad and Tobago and in the wider Caribbean region and in the wider world. I think we want the focus to be very much on the future and looking forward, but I think it will perhaps also need to just reflect a little bit on what's happened in the past year. It's been a very unusual year, very different, and very different to be sitting in this sort of environment and not in the Hyatt Hotel. So we are seeing all those changes. So I think let's start with getting just some quick perspectives from all of the panelists on how their companies have managed to adapt to the pandemic and how they managed to operate within the past year with all of the challenges which dealing with the COVID guidelines have brought in. I'll start with Claire. Claire, a couple of years ago at the Energy Conference, we heard all about how BP globally was sort of gearing up for automation and for everything to be able to done remotely, and for how artificial intelligence was going to allow the company to work more effectively. I mean, I assume that meant you were very well placed to be able to adopt to the COVID regulations. Did it turn out that way when you had to sort of have social distancing for everybody?
The short answer is yes, but it's actually provided more opportunities than we actually anticipated. So yes, because we had already done a lot of digital innovation, so we were able to keep running. But with the COVID restrictions coming in, it introduced other aspects that we hadn't been thinking about in the context of a digital transformation. And that's like the physical restrictions. Obviously, the first thing for us, like for any of us, was saying safety of our people. And for us, obviously, making sure the gas continues to flow. So that put other restrictions on people that we would normally take out to our facilities where we hadn't moved into digital. It actually forced us to reconsider and think things through of, can we still do things in different ways? So we actually probably upped our game in terms of whether it's use of robotics, AI, but also actually thinking about how we use people rather than always having to fly in international specialists. Actually, could we, through virtual reality, have our own people take on roles and tasks that previously they wouldn't have been exposed to? So the digital thing did set us up well in technology, but actually COVID has forced us to actually think about more things in a different way.
And I know, Jerome, do you want any reflections from a petrochemical plant operator point of view, where you often, if you have a maintenance project, you have lots of people coming on site. I mean, how have you managed to cope with those sort of situations?
Yes, well, like Claire, we were pretty much focused on our people. We recognize the need to remain employee focused, to keep operations going, and ensure while ensuring that our employees were safe. So we had to quickly adapt and put measures in place, of course, to protect our employees and everyone associated with the business. adapt quickly with things like work from home, implementing new technology and so on very, very quickly. But it was about keeping focus on our people, and they responded very well to changing circumstances. I mean, one step we took a few weeks into the lockdowns and so on was to implement encampment at our facilities in Point Lisas, and that worked well. It involved a lot of sacrifice from our employees, but it worked well, and remaining focused on them was the way to do it.
Vince, can you hear us online? It's all a bit strange in the room here. I feel like you're a bit somewhere out there, but BHP famously, before the pandemic had sort of extreme flexi time. I think sort of was known for having that. I don't know. Did that put you in a good position to be able to respond?
Yeah, Dax, I hope you're hearing me.
Yes,
I'm hearing you pretty good. Yeah, look, I mean, I think it would be the understatement of our time for me to say that the past 10, 11 months have been pretty challenging. And they have been, but they've also been extremely rewarding, in that we've learned to do things in different ways. We've understood capabilities of our people differently, and we've seen efficiency in our operation through a much different light. Oddly enough, 2020 was actually the most busy from an activity perspective year that we've had in many, and as both Claire and Jerome have said, we approached it first three perspectives. One, first and foremost, the safety and well-being of our people. If we couldn't assure that, then we couldn't keep going. Secondly, from the perspective of recognizing that we were an essential industry, ensuring that we played our part in keeping the lights on in Trinidad and Tobago, and thirdly, with regards to the fact that, we're a relatively large company and we have a role to play in society, and therefore, we felt that we needed to go beyond just our operating business and ensure that we were playing our part in society. We're not the government, but we had a role to play through our communities and also through working with the health sector. What we did very early in the game was go quickly to the science, engaging with Yale University and scientists in many institutions to figure out the best way that we could actually quarantine, test, and trace people so that we can keep our operations going. Because as I said, it was the busiest year that we've had in a long time, and we've been successful in doing that. And I think working as an industry, sharing the things that we were doing with the other industry participants, learning what they were doing so that we can optimize our plans. I think we've come together in a way that I've not seen previously, to be quite honest, which I think has been outstanding, and hopefully we can continue to do that. Look, I mean, our business, I suspect like everybody else, went virtual in March, and we continue to operate like that. In a sense, it's been a bit challenging, but I would say that we didn't really miss a beat, to be quite honest. It's been amazing to be part of that, just absolutely amazing.
Let's just ask Mark. I mean, from a state company point of view, I mean, how did NGC? Were you set up and ready for the change?
Well, some areas certainly accelerated, and I would say prior to COVID, it was already a difficult time, as you know, with the petchem prices at low cycles. So we were already looking at innovating with technology and so on. I think what happened with the COVID, one of the first response that we looked at is, quite apart from the public health response, there was a business continuity response by virtue of providing gas for electricity and things like that. So I think what the immediate response was to make sure the communication with the upstreamers and downstreamers, that we sort of communicated all the changes going on in that time. That gradually faded away. But employees adapted, I must say, very quickly. And a lot of the processes that we were trying to get done, I think a lot of them just accelerated and fell in place to the point where You know, we now have board meetings and employee meetings. I mean, it's kind of strange talking to hundreds of people in a virtual platform, but that's how it has become. You know, negotiations continued. It was fairly streamlined. And I remember getting a call on March 31st from some of my projects people. And they had come up with this tool, Projects Online, because in the state sector, of course, you spend a lot of money on projects, and it's important to account for how that money is spent and are you on schedule and are you on course. And that tool has been used ever since March 31st. Since that call, I remember that very clearly. And that's now being rolled out across the group. And so I think there's been learnings coming out of this. And I certainly commend the staff for continuing to innovate during this period.
And I mean, Dwight, I mean, you're here wearing your Energy Chamber chairman's hat, but you are also the owner of a big contracting company. How is it from a contracting company point of view when your workers, and a lot of their work they can't do digitally, they have to physically be there? I mean, how's that been over this past year?
Yeah, so you say big contractor, and I sit among the Promans and the BPs and the NGCs. So let's just qualify that we're a little fish in among these guys. But we had contractors have the opportunity to learn from a number of different sources of information. So we work for many of the companies represented here and otherwise, and they all have their own unique requirements for business continuity, how they address COVID, how you manage large numbers of people. They had maintenance projects that had to be done. We would send several hundred people to these sites, and you learn and you share those learnings among the plants as well. So you may have, depending on you start first with one client and you share those learnings. So we like Vince mentioned, we paid close attention to the science and the advice. There was some published data. The COVID wave came from east and came across to the west, and there was some published data that we actually utilized on how to manage your business, and that was very, very useful. Our people, as mentioned by the others, were very, very resilient and adaptable. So we saw a significant fall in business volume because we don't create projects, we execute projects for our clients. And there were a number of deferrals of projects. So you had that adjustment in terms of activity and revenue streams and so. But we adapted well. I think we adapted well. We were able to keep our clients happy, and our employees adjusted well. And we just had a check-in with them actually on how they're doing on this new virtual world. And I think there was probably a 70% preference for this type of hybrid way of operating. So I think there's been a lot of lessons learned along the way, and certainly we seize the opportunity to change.
Good. Let's now sort of, I think, try to shift the focus a little bit to what's going to come, the future. So it's all very uncertain. The industry is used to going through downturns. I think this is our third downturn in the last 12 years or so. We had the financial crisis, the 2014, 2015 downturn, and this year again. This one feels a little different. Is this just another downturn, or is this something different? Is this part of accelerating a fundamental shift? Perhaps Mark. I mean, from the NGC point of view, are you seeing this is this a different downturn to the previous things we've seen? Or are we going to go back to business as usual by the middle of this year?
Well, I think you have to look at some of the fundamentals behind what has happened here, because in the case of ammonia and methanol, there's been certainly shifts and changes going on there that was happening before COVID. For example, the shale gas revolution has certainly resulted in new plants in the U.S. and so on. There's been shifts away from sending product from Trinidad to the further away to Asia. So the dimensions around the industry has changed fundamentally. And then, even without COVID, there's been a lot of focus on the sustainability and energy mix for the future. So what that has done obviously has impacted the ability for those pure cycles to come back in without COVID, because certainly COVID had impacted the industrial demand side of the equation. The use of fibers and resins and automotives and all of those issues changed during COVID, but that will recover. That certainly will come again. The issues such as the long-term energy mix of the global use of coal, and that you're seeing a constant decline there. The peak has already happened. You see issues around peak gas and oil, and how that is shifting with the rise of renewables. So some of those fundamentals are surely part of the future. And therefore, the sooner that, all the companies and Trinidad policy and Caribbean policy can be shaped to prepare for that future, I think is best for not only NGC, but really all the companies in Trinidad, as well as playing our part, even though one can argue that in this region, we see that, there's only like 10% in Latin America and Caribbean contributing to the overall, emissions. But the effects on the region, the effects on us locally is tremendous. And it can't be ignored. The floods, the hurricanes, the effect on food security. I think those are the kinds of conversations we now need to kind of get into. In addition to how do we get out of this, as the economies recover, and they will. The ammonia and methanol would improve, but as you see over the next 5 years, there's not tremendous step changes, right? Because you have more production coming in, and you have, we still will be faced with the gas value chain being an important component for Trinidad, I think. So I think everyone is participating and looking forward for that. But there's no doubt about it. I think we can position ourselves here, not only looking at Trinidad, we have to pay attention to the region, and that includes the Guyana and Suriname and so on, but it also includes the other islands which are using, petroleum-related products, and, we're sitting here in the south part of the region. So I think we can play a much more meaningful role, and we can get into that discussion, later on.
I'm just perhaps asked, Jerome, there's been sort of question marks being asked about is there a future for Point Lisas? This is sort of one thing we're hearing in the public domain, people saying that. From your perspective, over the next few years, are you seeing, how does that future look? And is there a future to this petrochemical industry, which has brought so much to the country?
Well, yeah, certainly there is a future. We have to help shape it. If I could build off some of the points from Dwight and the Minister and Mark, Minister has emphasized the importance of Point Lisas and the downstream. And of course, where we sit is in the midst of the gas value chain, which is Mark's baby. Dwight has mentioned that the storm is not over. We're not past the rough seas as yet. And if I could go back to, what the Minister said and maybe build off of that a little bit, Point Lisas and everything connected to it, and the whole gas value chain, which includes LNG as well, so upstream, downstream, LNG, everybody. That was built on collaboration and relationships among the state enterprises, and multinational investors, both upstream and downstream. And then you had a services sector that was built around that as well. And if we talk about the future, it must involve collaboration and relationships working together to ensure that we have a future where we can all survive through tough times and share in the rewards as things get better.
Shift to you, Claire. In this past year, BP globally has had an enormous transformation.
I mean, that is being done because you're seeing the future looking very different. I mean, so what is the outlook given that for a country like Trinidad and Tobago?
I actually think it works really well. I mean, when we look at sort of the landscape, we're looking at not just 2021, we look at 2021 is important, but it's the 20-year horizon. And your opening question was, do you think that this is just going to be a traditional boom-bust cycle that we are used to in all the commodity sectors? For me, one of the things that has changed is actually on a global basis is actually going to be societal pressure. And that's when people around the world have seen cleaner skies because there aren't the aircraft flying around, because of the demand, change that COVID has driven. I think we are seeing an increase in societal awareness, and therefore I think there's going to be I don't know how fast is fast, a faster push to transition to a cleaner energy future. But when I think back then, so kind of, from a Point Lisa's perspective, gas is fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely critical as a transition to that. Roll forward 20 years, hydrocarbons, I think, are still going to be in the mix, but I think the whole energy field is going to be a much more complex mix. But when you also look at, okay, well, how do you decarbonize gas? Back into the minister was talking about CCUS. Gas and CCUS together gives you practically zero carbon fuel. But also, what are other fuels of the future? Hydrogen, ammonia. Ammonia is a great energy carrier. These are products that Point Lisa's has got all the skills and experience in. So it may not be identical to what we've had in the past 20 years, but I do think there is a future, and I'm just using it in a broad sense, an energy sector future. It's just how that makeup might look in 20 years' time may not be identical to what we've got today. But then for me, it's a little bit back to where you were going, I think, Jerome. How do we make the gas value chain work? Because fundamentally it is part of the transition, whether it's from a service company perspective, NGC or any of us, either upstream or downstream. And it's around getting really competitive so that we can continue to be playing successfully in all of these areas over the next 20 years. But yes, fundamentally we are seeing a different future, but it's not this year. It's just steps this year to when do we get to that future point? For us, we were saying, as a company, 2050 or sooner. The minister, I think, was absolutely right. Each country needs to decide what's the right pace for its trajectory. And then companies' roles is, well, how do we participate and partner and collaborate with achieving that outcome?
If I could perhaps ask Vince, BHP has had these big, very significant gas finds in the deep water northeast of Tobago. Are there concerns in BHP? I mean, is there a market for that gas, and can that be developed, or is the energy transition meaning that those are investments which will end up being stranded? What is the view from BHP around that, and do you see that there's still potential?
Dax, you have me cold sweating with that question, but
it's because you're not in the room, so I feel I can ask it.
Vince, to make it feel any better, it's got me cold sweating.
Yeah, it's also Claire as well. That's a good point. I'm sorry for Claire. You're also a major investor in that.
Yeah. Look, let me respond by first going back to the question you just asked, the one before this one, Dax. And I think I agree with what's being said. I think COVID it's either accelerated or given us a view into what the future might look like, when transition really takes hold, and I think it's fair to say that we all agree, that the energy sector is in transition. I think the awareness of that has been elevated in societies all around the world, and I think we are going to see a relatively strong push in that direction to decarbonize energy. But at the end of the day, the word to focus on in my mind is energy. The world is still going to need energy, for the future. And the likelihood is that it's going to need more. Now, if that's the case, then again, it's probably going to need all of the energy sources that we have today, plus the expansion of everything to come. So when we look at it from a fundamentals perspective, We see oil as being part of the future as well. It's not going to grow like the others, but when you factor in decline into the oil mix, there's going to be need for more oil resources coming online. You're also going to need gas. And I think Claire mentioned gas as being a fabulous transitional fuel, and that is so. But we have to find ways to figure out how we continue to decarbonize. When we look at, our deep water discoveries that, of course, are with our partner BP on that, we're pretty excited about, that potential, because we fundamentally see gas being part of the energy mix for some time to come. We see it from the perspective, because the world has a lot of gas. So we do believe that there is a thing called advantage gas, and that's gas that's relatively close to large existing markets, particularly markets that have inducement attached to it. So as volumes are falling off, it's inducing new supply to come on. And that's the role that we see that gas possibly playing into the future. So we're excited about it. We believe that the market in Trinidad and Tobago, yes, it's going through some changes, but, as Jerome said, and as Mark said and Claire said, Point Lisa's critical to the future. We've got work to do. I think everybody realizes that, to understand the value chain and make the adjustments that we need to make. But very confident, that that's going to happen, and that's going to continue to enable an industry to keep going in Trinidad and Tobago for some time to come. So we're excited. We think that the market in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be Point Lisas or LNG, they're strong markets, and they're going to be around for some time to come, as we continue to transition to different forms of energy, for the future. That's happening. But, you're going to probably need a lot of all of the fuels that we currently have to be able to provide the energy that the world is going to need.
So I think that there's been a sort of a theme that there is a lot of opportunity, but there are things which we have to change in Trinidad, sort of from a policy framework and a structure. So perhaps we can sort of explore a little bit about what some of those major issues are. I mean, Dwight in his speech had outlined many of them, sort of the areas. Some of them are captured in the Roadmap to Recovery document. But I think that there's a sense that we need to prioritize. What are the big things we have to really be concerned with now, in the next year to 2 years in terms of the policy changes. So I'll come to Mark, because in a way, NGC has a sort of a sort of somewhat advisory role within government as well. That you have a line of communication into the ministries around some of these policy issues. What, from your perspective, what are the big sort of things which are there in terms of policy changes? We heard, the electricity subsidy is one of them, but are there other things that you're really seeing there as the big shifts which have to be made?
Well, I think if you start with the issue of gas supply, I think it's important, particularly from the gas value chain work, which is being led by the ministry with gas strategies. It's going to be important to keep a firm eye on gas supply, both for the LNG and petchem sector, and all that it takes now, recognizing the changes that are going on in the landscape, because it's either deeper water, or it's cross the border, or it's marginal fields that will certainly help, boost supply, and even onshore, as you start to see happening now. I think some of the policy issues around, how we've capitalized on opportunities around venting and flaring, I think that's probably hanging fruit to go after, and therefore it's important, like NGC, to start working with Heritage and start looking at these issues and other players that we can, because I think that helps with the whole gas supply issue, and it helps with the environmental issues as well on methane. So I think there are policy issues that are around the energy mix for Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region that can be focused on. There's a Caribbean energy policy, and I think how we play in that space going forward is going to be important. There's the policies around power and how that is treated, and I think Dwight talked about that in his speech, and that is really not an elephant to be ignored. It is because it is obvious now. It's obvious in a space where the margins on NGC and in that space is quite different. What we pay for gas is quite different, and therefore if you superimposed a TNTech with the continued issues on that and ignore it, I mean, you quickly put the whole energy sector in jeopardy. So I think you see movements now where the government is trying to tackle the power issue and TNTech. How that lands, I wouldn't be able to say, but I think it's the right thing to look at because that also plays in the space in terms of how we position renewables and how that is priced and everything else compared to having subsidized electricity, where obviously the value that is bringing does not compare to the value that could be brought if you use the same molecules in some other space, right? So I think the issue around the whole TNTech and power issue is important. The issues of gas supply going forward and how that is incentivized given the changes in the landscape is important. I think the policies around the LNG trains are important because we are looking to simplify, we are looking to unitize there and make things a lot more simpler with Atlantic playing a much more focused world-class operator role. And in the case of the petchem, the gas value chain analysis and what comes out of that is going to be important going forward as some sort of big issues. That's how I see it.
Right, one of the things that which Mark didn't mention there, but you mentioned in your speech was the fiscal changes, the taxation changes. Are you seeing those as important things which need to be there to ensure we have a sustainable energy industry as well?
Well, absolutely. It's absolutely essential to ensure that our fiscal terms are such that we're able to compete for capital allocation by the multinationals to their investments to invest here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's always good to relook and reconsider where we sit in terms of that competitive landscape. And I think it is prudent on the part of the government, the Minister of Finance, to announce that they are going to have take a deep dive into that. And as mentioned in my speech, we certainly have put together a group that we think very, very well informed, well-respected people in that tax space. And we certainly will be doing our part as a chamber to assist the government in getting to that point of being competitive so we can continue to attract the capital that we need to keep the industry going.
There's been a few people who have mentioned sort of societal pressure. I should have said to all the people watching us on Zoom that you can bring societal pressure by putting comments in on the Zoom chat as well. So the people who are on the Zoom call logged in, if you put those in with some good questions and some good comments, I will also take those to the panelists. I have them coming up here as well. But on the fiscal, I mean, we've had a change, right, with supplemental petroleum tax for oil producers. I was wondering if anybody would be, I mean, Vince, BHP, both an oil and a gas producer, as is BP with some of its condensate production still. How do people see the future of oil as a specific sort of sector? I don't know, Vince, if you wanted to comment on that in a Trinidad context.
Sure. Thanks for that, and really like that response from Dwight with regards to the importance of the fiscal side of things. It's hard to sort of answer or talk about any of this without sort of referencing COVID. But I think one of the things that in my mind has come out of this is, and the minister mentioned it in his speech, is sort of that reality of shrinking margins, you know, and what that translates to, in my mind, is competitiveness, you know, and we've got to keep finding ways, you know, to be competitive. I think I can certainly speak on behalf of BHP. You know, we're doing everything that we can internally to drive that, you know, and I suspect there needs to be an enabling environment that comes through the state at the same time, you know. You know, look, I mean, with regards to oil, you know, as I said, we do see oil in the future for Trinidad and Tobago. You know, we sort of see it from the perspective that you know, I'm not going to try to predict price, but you know, we don't see sort of big price spikes, you know, but we do see a gradual growth in price, which in some ways is going to be driven by a return of demand that's going to come as a result of at some point of things getting better with regards to all of the you know, the economic impacts that the world has seen, and with that is going to come that challenge of supply, because a lot of investment has been deferred, you know, and as a result of the deferred investment, you know, that's going to bring a little bit of tightness, we believe, in the supply demand curve, you know. So we do continue to believe that that oil is going to be around for some time. It's going to be an important component of the fuel mix, particularly in developing countries, you know, which are the big growth hubs of the world, you know, and that is going to, I think, be a positive thing for Trinidad and Tobago. Now, if you ask me for how long and stuff like that, I don't know. I mean, I'd be guessing, but my sense is that, you know, the next couple of decades, we're going to be seeing a continued need for oil. Like I said before, not growing as fast as, certainly not growing as fast as renewables. That's going to grow faster than anything else, you know, and not growing as fast as gas either. But you're going to have to fill decline, you know, and there's got to be investment to do that, you know, and therefore I think it's still going to continue to be around, and certainly from a Trinidad and Tobago perspective, you know, I think it's going to be helpful in our portfolio to continue to have that as a country. Just my thoughts, Dax.
I'm seeing some. I mean, I read some analysts who say that they think because of the uncertainty of the future of you know, oil demand, that places which can bring oil to market quickly, so places with established hydrocarbon industries, will actually be sort of, you know, there'll be a preference for investment in those sort of places. So Trinidad, where we have a lot of oil in the ground and it just needs the investment to come in, you know, to produce that, it actually might be a location where there's still an interest. But I think that a big part of that will be ensuring that we can get our cost of production you know, down to a reasonable level. So I think that will be what a big challenge for our oil industry is. Which, I think the changes with heritage perhaps are, you know, an indication that we can do a lot in that area. So I think we just need to keep a focus, you know, on that. And so perhaps we will have an opportunity within, you know, secondary recovery, enhanced oil recovery, these sort of things where you have, and we have infrastructure in place. So Vince mentioned that, but one of the comments that came in was around, of course, people always ask about, you know, people's views on oil and gas prices, and Vince said that, you know, difficult to see oil prices spiking, but might be a gradual increase. Gas prices is much more complicated, Claire. I mean, you know, we see some of these gas prices in some locations. Just recently, we had record high spot prices for LNG in Asia. You know, so what's going on with gas? But Henry Hub's still, you know, pretty low. I mean, 250, 260. What's going on with gas prices?
It is a complicated area, and there's a number of things that have been driving it. Some COVID associated, as buyers of gas think through, well, what's the demand going to be, therefore how much forward purchasing do I want to do, what's my supply requirements. And for both some of the European countries and for Japan, they were very low on their inventory at the point super, super cold snaps. And I think Japan's got the coldest winter in 50 years or something like that. So that was what they suddenly needed more than they actually had originally planned they were going to need, in which case that just puts the price up. There was also some transportation issues through Panama Canal, which also caused some other backlogs in terms of actually the supply hitting the buyers and the utilities when they needed it. So what it does, though, indicate is that the markets they're regional, they're not global. And the question is, will they become global? So will you end up with a price for gas in whatever its form, the same way as you do for oil? You've got your markers of Brent or WTI. Or actually, when you think, again, longer term, will you actually go to much more localized energy hubs, however that energy is sourced, given the complex mix that's likely to come in over the next 2 decades? So it's difficult to know which direction prices will go, because it does depend. Do you think it's going to become a global market, or do you think in time, actually, partly due to transportation costs, the zero carbon agendas, do you actually end up with something much more regionalized, which case you're always then going to have that volatility when people are trying to balance, well, what's the demand and supply, but also that's right back down to what's the consumer's needs as well. So it's difficult to know where they're going to go. But certainly the highest LNG prices in most traders' experience have just been seen. But equally, yes, who would have predicted last year would have had, what, minus 40 for WTI?
Joe, and what's the challenge of that then for petrochemical producers? You're relying upon buying gas. I mean, what does that mean to how you look at the world and where you put your investments?
Yeah, I think if I could go back for a minute to the gas strategies exercise that is being done, the consultants that are working on the gas value chain review, I think that is probably one of the most important events over the coming months in this country, because that's going to determine the future for all of us. If we look at the petrochemical sector, I mean, we were already in a very challenged place even pre-COVID, and COVID, well, that was just purely devastating, on the industry. But if we look at where some of the fixes might be, and I mean, Dwight spoke about fiscal reform and so on. Apart from the electricity subsidy, which the sector has to bear, meaning the entire value chain has to bear. You have the question of fiscal reform, where maybe some fiscal reform upstream might serve to bring down the gas price to the local sector. And when I talk about fiscal reform, I'm not in any way thinking that the state reduces its take, overall, because it's sort of a redistribution, whereby reducing taxation at a particular point in the value chain, the state overall gets better returns through the economic activity and taxation, personnel, company-wise, and so on. So I think that's an important way to look at it when we talk about fiscal reform, because overall, if you take, for example, the ammonia and methanol plants that have been idle in Point Lisas, right now they're generating zero value for the country and for the owners. If through this gas value chain exercise we can find some way to breathe life into that again, it'll be a win for everybody. The investors, the state, more employment, the wider society. So that's how I because there is a need. Gas pricing, is a critical factor, and there's a need to be creative in how we find solutions for that.
So we've had a discussion around sort of fiscal and tax and tax. I want to move a little bit to the services sector, but there's a sort of one issue before we get to that, and I want to do that in a bit of a wider Caribbean basis. But before we get to that, there's one other reform area which I think has the ability to help the entire industry, which is around the sort of the whole government regulatory ease of doing business process. So I think there's a lot of conversation about how your companies transition quickly and, did things digitally and, more effectively and could work from home. But there's a real sense that, that the state institutions are, perhaps, somewhat lagging in terms of their ability to do some of those things. And we had at the conference last year, we had a study by Kenneth J. when they had shown that if you could shorten the time frame for an investment from a bid round through to first gas in the pipe, which is sort of around 7 years, if you could shorten that just because of the regulatory approval process, the EIAs and the ministry approval processes, and getting the shore pipeline approvals through the Commission of State Lands, all these sort of factors which add to project the timeline on a project. That if you could shorten that by a year for a typical sort of shallow water Trinidad, medium-sized gas field, you could see that the project's NPV with a 1 year shorter gas coming into pipeline, improving by over $100 million US dollars of the NPV on that project. So what sort of focus do you think we need in terms of the government focusing on that regulatory approvals process just being easy? I mean, I don't know if Mark, if you have any sort of comments around that, and as you're seeing projects being developed, are there things which could really happen to make that quicker?
Well, I know the work has already started on this approval process through the chamber. But if you look at NGC and TT Engage through National Energy, I mean, that was intended to, if any projects are developing, one doesn't have to go to all the various state entities for approvals, and then you can't see where the whole project lies. TT Engage was set up for that purpose, for any business on the estate. So I think from a technology standpoint, we have to use those kinds of tools. So at least I'm encouraged to see there's a Ministry of Digitization. I haven't seen the plan yet, but at least I think those kinds of processes certainly help in reducing timeframes. And the other part of it is really how we work together to get the value for the future. And I'm not strictly talking about regulatory policy. I'm talking about how local content was one of those things, right? How we actually benefit and get value. And I think the Energy Chamber is also doing things there. The value that I see, though, given that there are a lot of companies here in Trinidad and Tobago, from all the multinationals in upstream and downstream, I continue to question how much more value we can get, other than just the pure gas value chain issues. And I'm not talking a regulatory approach. I'm talking how if we really put our minds together, how can we really get the downstream to add value in the fertilizer and food production, where we know we have some terrific deficits, right? How do we get into the space of new energy and methanol in transport and so on? How do we kind of start bridging these gaps from a governmental standpoint as well? And not just leave it to the individual processes. Somehow that encouragement, that environment also needs to happen to get the value for the country.
So you're talking there, about the expertise and the knowledge which exists within the energy sector, and bring that to bear on other issues within the country.
I'll just kind of wind back on NGC alone. NGC has a terrific GIS department. We look at land and pipelines across the country, all year round, and we look at gas leaks. We look at land slips and so on, and we can pinpoint it. And the question I started asking myself, well, can NGC then play a role, just like others can play a role in adding a greater value than just what we do for NGC and land slips and pipelines? Can we now use that kind of emerging technology to assist in water leaks? Can we assist in how the floods are now visualized? And it could mean just working with other people in a different way and thinking differently. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about that needs a switch to be turned on that really can then capitalize more value for the country. This can be part of the roadmap to recovery. The expertise is here.
Sure. Right. I mean, we've spoken a lot in the past in the Chamber about taking the expertise which Trinidad has in the energy sector and using that as a way to generate more diversified exports into the wider Caribbean. Is that something which you still think has potential? Are we able to grab those opportunities? Any just reflections on that ability to diversify our exports and our energy service exports in particular?
I think there's tremendous opportunity. And I think the 5 years since Exxon's finds in Guyana has taught the local service sector quite a lot. In my own personal experience dealing with, for example, Guyanese and Surinamese companies, in the case of Guyana, for example, sure, there's an absence of familiarity with oil and gas because it hasn't been there. But they're very entrepreneurial, very capable organizations, people with great vision. And I think that of course it's a long-term play. That whole, the discoveries continue. And I think there's a lot that we have learned here in Trinidad and Tobago because of our over 100-year-old industry that allows us to take value to those jurisdictions and to partner up with some of these very entrepreneurial people across there and recognize that it is their patrimony and they, I think, realize that there's something that we can offer. So I think with that type of approach, I think certainly the service sector in Trinidad needs growth. And in the current circumstances in Trinidad and Tobago, it's difficult to find growth. But fortunately, in the region, there are significant opportunities. So to answer your question, yes, there are significant opportunities. And I think that our innovative sector is making good inroads into Guyana and Suriname where these opportunities are rising for now. And I'm no doubt that as they arise in the wider Caribbean region, that we'll continue to do so.
And Claire, we've seen some of the major oil and gas companies in Trinidad putting investments into solar. And we have these two big solar projects which are going through the approval process and hopefully will come out of the end of it sometime in the not too distant future. Do you think that there is expertise which the international operators, BP and Shell and BHP and the others can bring to Trinidad to help with that energy transition?
Yes, I think there is, but I think the best way for that to happen is for the projects to actually progress, because that's when the expertise will come into country, and that's when you can start through collaboration to then have some of that transfer to actually then allow that to develop and build locally. It's also, I think, important for us all to think, where would Trinidadian companies best compete in that space and focus on that? And what I'm thinking of is, if I'll use the solar example, where are solar panels currently manufactured, and is that something that Trinidad could compete with? And if the answer is yes, then fine, we focus on that. If the answer is no, but actually there are other aspects of a solar project or a wind project or whatever, where actually building on the expertise and skills that are here, that's where we should be focusing on transferring it from the traditional oil and gas into other things, but also then creating from the service sector another set of services that can also then be regionalized and not purely just for Trinidad. But I think we actually need to start getting some of the projects moving. Otherwise it becomes an academic exercise,
Sure.
Which isn't actually what is needed, because we actually want something that's going to become real and can actually generate the value. But I think it's as we need to get the projects going, and then I do think that will start to happen.
Can our expertise in the offshore oil and gas industry, we've seen globally that has been used a lot, particularly in the North Sea, into wind. Is that something which has a potential from Trinidad at all?
Oh, I think so. Around a number of things, whether that's from an engineering right the way through down to kind of operators. I know that sort of history has shown this. Mark, you may have had some of this experience in Australia. When the LNG plants were setting up in Australia, boy, did you worry about your operators in the refinery. because they were the best people who could get poached to go and move to an LNG plant because it's transferable skills. I think it's exactly the same within the renewables sector. Maintaining and operating, designing, building, it's core skills that I think we have here in Trinidad.
This is a question which perhaps might get best to Dwight as the chairman of the chamber. Where do you see the Caribbean single market in all of this? Of this discussion. I mean, you mentioned in your speech that they need to advance the CSME. How important is that, for a future for the energy industry of the Caribbean that we have regional integration?
Oh, I think it's essential, and more than just for energy, for so much more. We're talking about change weather patterns and hurricanes and all these different things that I think as a region we'll accomplish much more together in terms of energy, and I guess outside of energy, the movement of people. Right now it's still difficult to move people within the region in terms of the particular categories or classifications of people who can move without work permits and so. But most of the craft and skilled and people that actually get the work done, they need to have work permits and so on. So there's work to be done to facilitate the free movement of people and skills. And I'd like to see through CARICOM you have a broader thinking as a region collectively, which I think is very important as we all face the challenges and opportunities that as a region we face.
Anything that can also coordinate something around the energy transition to introduction of renewables? I'm thinking, one of the things that always occurs to me is that the region has these fantastic geothermal resources, but they're all too big for the individual islands which they are on. We have the expertise because from Trinidad we're drilling. I mean, we know about how to drill wells. We're doing it for 150 years, but none of those projects can move forward because the market in each island is too small. So is that an area where you could sort of see regional integration? I mean, Mark, I don't know if I know you've been thinking about integration of gas around the Caribbean, but electricity integration as well from renewables?
Well, it's all connected because I think if you look at the energy use in the Caribbean, it's largely oil-based. And NGC has already started to do projects in the Caribbean that has been focused on countries deliberately trying to get to renewables, but they want a infrastructure that is gas related as a bridging mechanism so that they can get to the renewable stage at some point in time. So I think the mentality that we should have is not that Trinidad has all the expertise. I think the mentality we should have is that we should be partnering and working out the needs together with others. And if we can learn from some of these other countries, we should be able to benefit. I mean, one example of that is in the Energy Chamber Energy Conference that was 2020. We brought somebody from Chile. And that's because we went there and we saw that, wait a minute, they have a sustainable, energy agency. They get involved in standards, legislation, labeling, education, and, we don't have to reinvent wheels. So even Trinidad can learn from that experience in managing its own energy policies and the mix. The Caribbean energy policy is also a mechanism, I would say, in the CSME to try to bring all of this together. But I think the energy mix issue with gas as a transition, as we have said, has already started. And some of the Caribbean countries, some of them are already there in renewables, in Costa Rica, for example. So it's not to say that we go there and say, all right,
this is how you do it.
Yeah, this is how you do it. This is a case where we can partner and learn and actually shape how fast the energy transition happens in the Caribbean together with people who have the expertise, and we're learning in that process, but at the same time we can bring our own expertise. So it's how we approach it, and doing it under the Caribbean energy policy and these mechanisms that exist can only accelerate it, apart from the direct discussions we're having now, trying to build infrastructure and so on, which is what we're doing.
We're beginning to run down on time, but Jerome, I just wanted to ask you about the integration of renewables into the petrochemical sector. So there's been this project in Trinidad around hydrogen from electrolysis, from solar, but I know you also, Proman has been working on some ideas around waste to methanol as well, methanol as a transport fuel. What's the future of these sort of greener petrochemicals, and how important is that for the region to be involved in those things?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, both methanol and ammonia are very viable alternative sources for fuel. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have 3 ships being constructed right now, which are dual fuel, methanol and traditional. So we have that ongoing. You may have seen in the news recently, we are partnering with UE on that anaerobic digestion to biogas project. So we have that going on site in Trinidad. Outside of Trinidad, we have an investment in a similar type project or concept in Varennes. And it is a particular area of focus for us specifically. But I think for the industry in a wider sense, methanol and ammonia has a future as well, has a green future as well. Especially in the fuel area. I mean, right here in Trinidad, there is an opportunity to do fuel blending, which is something well established in other parts of the world. So there's already opportunity here for that, which would overall serve to reduce vehicle emissions and save costs. So yeah, there's a future, a green future.
I'm always a little, I mean, I don't know if you can put you on the spot with this one, but I'm always a bit confused why the methanol fuel blending hasn't happened yet. It seems to be such a logical thing to happen in the country. Why have we not managed to advance that?
Yeah, I guess it hasn't fully taken traction as yet, but as we go along, I'm sure it will gain traction, and eventually we'll have some success.
We were due to finish in exactly 1 minute's time, so we're going to have to wrap up. I just want to ask Vince if there's any last comments on this sort of comment also around regional integration that he would like to bring to the table.
Thanks, Dax. And maybe just to add a little bit on 2 things. One of the things that I think we probably have all learned over the past 10 months is how, in a sense, borderless skills and capability can be. I think the ability for us to do things virtually has just grown immensely in a very short period of time, and you can expect that that's going to continue. Now that, in my mind, provides huge opportunity, and of course, like most things, a possible threat. We need to understand how we can utilize that to be able to take skill and capability outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And if we don't do that, that gap will be filled by others, because I think that is entirely possible nowadays. So I don't think we can any longer sit and think that we have all of this skill and capability here that people are going to want. We have to, in a sense, push it. We have to push it out of Trinidad and Tobago to make it work. Things have changed. The other thing that I would add is that if there has ever been something that requires integrated solutions, it is the new energy world. You need absolutely integrated solutions, going from fossil fuel energy to renewables to hydrogen. You need big integrated solutions. Part of that is you need an integrated resource plan, and how we do that for Trinidad and Tobago and how the Caribbean does that, I think is going to be very, very important for the future. This is an awesome time that we're living in, but the change is also immense, and we just need to be recognizing the opportunities that come along and not sort of resting on some thoughts that we had previously of of maybe where our competitive advantage lies. It may not lie there any longer.
One of the comments that somebody, my good friend Glenn Roy London had put it into the chat on the Zoom, making the point that that knowledge transfers much more easily than people, making the point that Japan is playing pan very well, and so they've taken our expertise. I mean, Mark, that's something I think.
I witnessed that. I witnessed that personally, and that's for sure. In fact, you could close your eyes and you would think it's Renegade's playing. Yeah. Watch out.
So in this year of virtual carnival, it's something which could really accelerate as well. So I think we're out of time. We're actually slightly over time. So I will wrap up. Ask the panelists. I think Vince had sort of made some final points there. I don't know if Jerome, any last 10 seconds, last comment you would like to make?
Hurricane is not over, and collaboration, relationships, finding creative solutions.
Claire?
I'll do it as a strap line. The future's bright, but it's different.
Okay. And Mark?
Yeah, the landscape is going to change, no doubt about it, with respect to our own capabilities being leveraged here, as well as efficiencies will be necessary at all parts of the chain. So I think no matter what the gas value chain yields in terms of value, all of us here would have to be focused on improving the efficiencies and everything in this whole chain if we have to focus on competitiveness. And then, of course, I think there's a big opportunity when it comes to the new energy mix and what role we play going forward in that space.
Dwight, as chair of the chamber, any last comments?
Yeah, I think these are exciting times. A lot has changed. I think we need to get down to the nuts and bolts and get things done. And I'd like to see, close collaboration between the government and the energy chamber and other business entities, because I think the private and the public sector, I think together can help to sharpen the definition of what we want to get after, what we need to do, and then put some timelines in place and measurement system. What gets measured gets managed. And I think the government and we all should be reporting on how we progress, having set that time.
Right. Yeah, I think that reporting on how we're progressing, I think, is an important thing we have to do. And as a chamber, I think one of our obligations is also to report back to our membership regularly. I'll sort of leave it on that point. To thank you all. There's just a sort of a quick vote of thanks. To thank everybody who logged in. I think we had close to 500 people logged in through the Zoom, and then others on Facebook, and I think on other social media, on LinkedIn as well. Almost up to the numbers we have for a conference. This is all recorded, and I hope people will be watching again in the future. So thank you everybody for logging in. I would like to particularly thank the Minister of Energy for his presentation, and he stayed with us here listening to a lot of the panel discussion this morning, and it was great to have him. And I think there's a very strong collaboration in which we have with the ministry, and we just need to continue that. I'd like to thank you all as panelists, and to thank our 6 platinum sponsors for supporting the conference. So that's BP, the NGC group of companies, BHP, First Citizens, and Shell, and Proman. And we'll also have Touchstone as a silver sponsor, who have also come on board for the conference. I'd like to thank Guardian Media for making this facility available to us. There's a number of people had asked some questions on the chat, which we will capture those and get back to individuals around that, about some specifics around how the conference will be organized. But come June, we hope it's going to be somewhat of a face-to-face. We're having to get good at hybrid. This is the challenge which I'm really seeing from just an event management point of view. I think we know how to do virtual conferences very easily. We know how to do face-to-face conferences very easily. We've done that for a long time. We're good at doing that. It's a mix of virtual and face-to-face where the real challenge it has been. I think it's worked fairly well this morning.
because we've had mostly here, but people watching we've had a conversation here, people watching online. I think that has worked fairly well, but I think that is the big challenge of how do you integrate this, the digital, virtual, and the in-person meetings. And I think that there's going to be a lot more of that in the future, and that's going to be our big challenge. So just like to thank everybody for logging in. I'd like to thank my staff, as always, for all their hard work in bringing these events together. We'll be back online next week from Monday for the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Conference, obviously a very important event for us. So I hope as many of you as possible will log in for that as well. So thank you all, and we will be seeing you again in June, if not before. Thank you.